of God has occupied the human mind since the beginning of time. Have you ever asked yourself, why is there something and not nothing? Why is there anything at all? Doesn't there need to be some ultimate explanation for the reality that we see all around us? Throughout history, the great majority of people in all times, places, and cultures have come to the conclusion that the best explanation for us and the complex and beautiful world that we see around us is that it was made by a creator. Over the years, there have been many diverse arguments put forward for the existence of God. Today, I want to briefly explore 3 classical arguments for God's existence. The first one is the cosmological argument, or the first cause argument. In its simplest form, this argument states the following. Number 1, anything that begins to exist has to have a cause. Number 2, the universe began to exist. Number 3, therefore, the universe must have a cause that is beyond itself. This argument is based on the idea that if something begins to exist, it has to have a reason for coming into existence. It has to have a reason for beginning to exist. In other words, something cannot come from nothing. Why doesn't this apply to God? Well, because God never began to exist. God is by definition eternal and uncreated. So, as you see, there are only 3 possibilities here. Either everything we see came from nothing, everything we see has always existed, or everything we see was caused by something eternal, something that has always existed. The first option seems logically impossible. In other words, something cannot come from nothing. You may remember the lines from the song Something Good in the movie The Sound of Music. It goes like, nothing comes from nothing, for nothing ever could. They were right. It seems there are really good reasons to be sure that the universe began to exist at a fixed point in the past. On the other hand, there are significant philosophical problems with a universe that has always existed. As author Frank Turek points out, logically it is impossible to cross an infinite series of moments in history. It would be like trying to jump out of a bottomless pit. If the universe had been in existence forever, you could never get to this moment right now. Beyond the philosophical, the scientific evidence that we have points quite strongly to the fact that at one point in the past, everything that we know now, matter, energy, space, and even time itself, began to exist. So there must be something eternal, something that has always existed, that caused all that we see around us. After you get to this point, you have to ask yourself the question, what kind of cause could have created the universe that we see all around us? When you look at the size of the universe, with its more than 100 billion galaxies, and a breadth that it would take a laser beam 93 billion years to cross, it seems clear that whatever the cause, it has to have great, even infinite power. I mean, how much power does it take to cause something that doesn't exist, even something small, to begin to exist? When you think about the complexity of the universe, the human brain, the DNA, dragonflies, rainforests, dolphins, and on, it seems that whatever the cause of the universe has to have super intelligence. When you think about your own consciousness and the moral law that is written on the human heart, you get some indication that the cause of the world cares deeply about good and evil. When you put these ideas together, eternal, great power, incredible intelligence, goodness, you suddenly have a cause that looks a lot like a traditional definition of God. The second argument that I want to explore is called the teleological argument, or the argument from design. This argument is pretty straightforward. In the universe, we observe order and complexity that cannot be reasonably explained by some kind of unguided processes working over time. Instead, these things can be best explained by an intelligent cause. To illustrate, if you were walking on the beach and saw a rock, you might say to yourself, this rock may have always been there. But if you were walking on the beach and you see an iPad, something in you knows that that hasn't always been there, that a mind, much like yours, created it. Or suppose you are walking among the mountains and you see these beautiful swirling patterns. You may think that they were caused by many years of wind and rain. But if you're walking among the mountains and see the faces of the four former United States presidents looking at you from the mountainside, Mount Rushmore, something in you knows that those were produced by intelligence. Author Norman Geisler asks us to consider this scenario. You are lying in the park and you look up at the sky and you see, drink Coke. Will you think, wow, that's an unusual cloud formation? No, that is a message, and messages only come from minds. When you think of the DNA in its simplest form, in the simplest life form that we know, has enough messages, enough detailed information in code to fill 1,000 sets of encyclopedias. In the same way, when we look at the laws of chemistry and physics, the inner workings of the cell, our own mind, and a trillion other things, we find that only an intelligent cause could produce those kind of things. One of the most exciting discoveries of recent science is something called the fine-tuning of the universe. Scientists have found that many things in the universe, things like the mass of the electron, the strength of the force of gravity, the nuclear force that holds the atoms together, the speed of the expansion of the universe, and so on. These things have to be almost exactly what they are for any possibility of life. Some of them are so exact that if you change them just a little, like 1 part in trillions, it would not be possible to have anything like life. But how can this can be explained if everything is a product of chance? Here's a hint. It can't. The final argument I want to consider is the moral argument. The idea here is this. If there is no God, there really is no basis for real good and evil. In other words, if we are really just a collection of atoms and the product of chance, then good and evil is just an illusion. The problem is that even though some people say, all right, it's just an illusion, something that's just in our heads, people cannot and will not really live like this. As soon as they feel that some injustice is being done to them, they will shout, no fair, you shouldn't do that, that's wrong, etc., and act as if morality is not just something that we made up. This is a powerful argument. If we really want to be able to say that loving your neighbor is better than eating your neighbor, or that it's really wrong to torture a little child for fun, then you have to base it on something other than the material world. From matter, you can get data, but from matter, you cannot get morality. The famous Russian author Dostoevsky said, if God does not exist, everything is permissible. That is, everything is allowed. He was right. If you give up God, you have to say that many things that are at the center of the human experience, meaning, purpose, beauty, freedom, goodness, love, are just illusions with no reality behind them. But there are very good reasons for trusting what your hearts and your mind tell us. And they tell us that these things are real. And if they are real, there is a real God that stands behind them. Throughout the ages, many people have argued that a very good case can be made for a creator. Historically, many different arguments have been put forth for the existence of God. Today, we looked at 3 arguments: the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, and the moral argument. Perhaps, like countless others, you are able to see today that the case for a creator is truly compelling.